Welcome to the Ebony Road Players podcast. I'm your host, Edye Evans Hyde, singer, performer, and founder of Ebony Road Players. As a Black theater company in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Ebony Road Players strives to inspire, educate, and engage the cultures of our community. In this podcast, we take a deeper dive into the topics and issues surrounding the stories that we tell. So let's jump right into some meaningful dialogue and celebrate the diverse communities that we share. Welcome, everyone. I am really excited to be our guest host today for a very special episode of the Ebony Road Players podcast. We are so excited to have you with us today as we talk to a very special guest, Edye Evans Hyde, our founder and executive director of Ebony Road Players. Welcome, Edye.
Oh, I'm on the other side of this. So
You're in the hot seat now.
I'm in the hot seat. Very glad to be here. Very glad to have you be the guest host today, Quianna. So this will be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to just get to know you a little bit better. I know you really well, but I'd like for our listeners to get to know you a little bit more. Awesome. So in true fashion, I'd like to start with a quote today. And this is from Angela Davis. It says, Black women have had to develop a larger vision of our society than perhaps any other group. They've had to understand white men, white women, and Black men, and they've had to understand themselves. When Black women win victories, it's a boost for virtually every segment of society. And as we are kicking off Women's History Month, we are also going into our Founders Day celebration. These conversations about the impact of women in our society are extremely important. And I thought that quote was really interesting. So when you think about the impact of Black women, how does that resonate with you?
It resonates. I mean, that's a wonderful quote by Angela Davis. And I just want to say a lot of people who don't know Angela Davis should really look Angela Davis up. Very much, very smart, controversial woman of the past. But, you know, we're all at this age now where we can look back and really talk about the impact of some of these women. I would say that is probably one of the most amazing quotes to me, because I have always felt that when Black people in general really do move forward in civil rights or in voting or anything that's really important, the whole country benefits from that. White women benefit from it, white males benefit from it, everyone in our country benefits from women, and Black women particularly, moving forward. And I've always felt that Black women particularly have had to navigate the country and navigate their place in it by being able to be a voice for almost everyone. And that's always been in my mind. So when you said this quote, it was like, yes. I mean, when you go back to even slavery, the aspect that a woman had to take care of her family, had to take care of the slave owner's family, and really create a language that they were able to communicate with their slave owners to protect even their own families. So I always think that Black women have always had to navigate that space. And I know that I have personally had to figure out how to navigate different spaces that I am in. And I love doing that. But what I feel is important is that not everybody has to take that time to navigate different spaces. Everyone but Black women, I think, just get to be who they are, but I'm the one responsible for navigating how I communicate with certain people. And I that's a powerful quote to me.
And I think that was what resonated with me in selecting it. It's we have been, as Black women, have been put in a position to consider everyone and everything. And while the world benefits from that, it's also exhausting.
Yes, it's exhausting.
And I think that the weight behind it should garner a little more appreciation than it does, because I don't know that, as she said, it's different than any other segment. And I don't know that when you consider the effort that it takes to consider everything and everyone, I don't know that people understand, outside of Black women, what that really means.
Right. And I'll go a little further in, as because of that kind of power that we do have, people do take it for granted. And they figure we can take anything, we can do anything. Pain is nothing. And there is a lot of mental health issues, I think, that go along with that for Black women. But it is something we're able to navigate. And so it's twofold. One is, yay, we can navigate it. Two, wow, I'm tired at the end of all of this.
Exactly.
So yeah, absolutely.
So I know we've talked many times about the women that have inspired you throughout your journey as an artist and educator. We'll get a little bit more into your journey in a minute, but I wanted to start off with just touching on some of those influential figures that you looked up to as you were coming up.
Yeah. And because I'm old, I've had a lot of influences. And at first I thought it was going to be really hard for me to navigate that particular question. Because each time of my life, in my 20s, I looked up to certain people. In my 30s, I looked up to certain people. In my 40s, I looked up, and I'm not going to go any further than that, but I still do look up to people, because I think I'm always still in this learning mode. And I believe that you learn until you are no longer here. That's how I take it. But when I really thought about it, and this is going to make me cry, I think the person that I looked up to and still continue to look up to the most and get guidance from, just for her being, is my mother. My mother, and now she's going to be 91 this month. And yeah, and it occurred to me that I'm kind of her right now, but there's so many things about her that I still am learning. Mainly, she was an educator. And so education was never a question for my family. We were all getting educated some way, one way or another. And where I think my dad was a little more conservative with what we should be doing as Black people, my mother allowed me to be a little free. She was always there for me when I'm like, hey, I have a performance with these people and they want me to sing. What do you think about that? She came to my very first bar gig, which my dad did not want me to be in a bar at all. But my mom came and was just amazed that her daughter was singing with this group. She's traveled with me. She has just been there for me, and she is kind, smart, and to this day, having the dementia that she has, she's still loving. But at the same time, I've known times in my life where someone's coming after her. She's a little spoiled because she was an only child. When someone's coming after her and she has fear, she does not cower. She, with her little tiny self, will start screaming and yelling and telling people to get out of her room and, whatever. And I remember that when I was like 2, that she had to go after someone in our apartment building that was not being very nice to her. And it just hit me that, oh my gosh, I guess I'm kind of like that. And, you know, sometimes I thought, oh, she's embarrassing me or whatever, but she lived hard. She loves hard. But she stands up for herself, and she's into knowledge and the arts. She was a music major. She went to a Black college, a woman's college, back in the 50s or whenever she went to school, called Bennett College, all women's Black college. And I think a lot of her class that comes from her is from that experience in being in this women's college. I mean, it was one of those things where they had to wear white gloves when they went to places. I mean, it was really, that's what was going on back in the day, making a Black woman proud of who she is and knows how to present herself in a space. And I just, that's who it is. And I still, right now I'm taking care of her, but I'm realizing the reason I'm able to take care of her is because of what she taught me while I was growing up, and still teaches me every day.
That's incredible. And that, I think, when we peel back all the layers, we can, you know, most of us can look back and look at celebrities and look at, you know, public figures as a form of inspiration. But when you peel it all away, that base generally comes from home.
Yes.
And it's funny because I've been in this season of life recognizing these little ways that I'm becoming more and more like my mom. Our birthdays are one day apart. So
oh my goodness.
it's really hard to avoid. I'm just my mom, right? I mom just like my mom. And
yep.
that you know, that speaks to me so much, because so many of those things that we couldn't necessarily appreciate when we were younger, you look back now and you're like, actually, she might have been on to something.
Right. Yeah. And my mom is, my birthday's on the 6th. My mom's birthday's on the 10th.
Oh, wow.
So we're both Pisces.
Very similar experience.
Yes, very similar experience. And the other thing I think I really discovered, and it's kind of what you just said, is what we can have celebrities that we see on TV that, wow, I really want to be that way. I really want to look like that. I really want to do what they're doing. Those people on the surface are people who kind of give me encouragement that it can be done. But my mom has given me that feeling and support and knowledge that, yeah, you can go and do this. You can, and I will be there with you. She went to China with me. She's been to LA with me. We drove together in LA. And she was fun. She's fun. She was absolutely fun. We went to LA for an event, and that I was in, and I wanted her to be there with me. And on our way back, we went back to our hotel rooms, and she decided she wanted to have some sake. This hotel had sake, and I'd never had sake before. And we drank the sake and got as inebriated as you can get. We almost couldn't pack our stuff to get back to the plane to get back home. We did, but I thought, oh my God, I'm getting drunk with my mother. What the heck is that? And that she was a fun person. I have to keep her from doing things because she makes me get into trouble. So there we go.
I love that. I think there's a different relationship, you know, that develops with parents and their adult kids, as long as they're open to it, right? And yes, that is very powerful. But you mentioned, right, seeing these celebrities, it lets you know it can be done, but there's that component that's necessary to say, but you can do it, yes, right? And I think that's extremely powerful. And, you know, I think it's really important to recognize those people who tell us that we can do it, right? Those, because that's where the true influence comes from, is that support and that encouragement that we can, you know, and we will, right? So Speaking a little bit about, I know you mentioned LA and China. I'd like to talk a little bit about your experiences, you know, as high level or as in depth as you want to go. But I want to kind of look at it through the lens of being a Black woman and having these experiences. How do you think being a Black woman informed, impacted, or influenced you moving around in these spaces?
You know what? That's really hard for me, because I don't think when I first started doing this stuff, this traveling, this going through theater and traveling to China, I never took into, I never thought of how do I need to handle this being a Black woman. I always took it in as, ooh, this is going to be a nice experience. This is going to be a fun experience. And I don't think that, I think maybe later in life, I realized that I was a Black woman in this particular space. But anytime when I was younger, especially, I was just in the space. It never occurred to me that I had to, in that time, make it something that I had to watch out for. I figure if everyone was accepting me, they were accepting me for what I was bringing to the table and not really being a Black person. Now, when on the opposite end of that, when I got professional jobs, teaching, working at the colleges that I worked at, I realized that they were looking at me being a Black woman and bringing something to them. But I never went into it like that. I went into it as, yes, this is a job I want to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. And if you think that I can add something to your space, then here I am. But I think that I was in fact, one time I got a job at a particular institution, and I was really excited about it. It was something totally new for me, but I guess I had whatever skills I needed at that time. And I remember being told by the higher ups that they had gotten a barrage of phone calls asking whether I was Black and if that's why I had gotten the job. I mean, it was really weird that they said that to me. And it was the first time that I realized, oh my goodness, people on the outside are not seeing me as a person that can do the job, but seeing me as a strategic hire for them having someone Black in that position. And that's always a little hurtful that you've got to kind of play around that way. But in my opinion, if that's what you need and I can do the job, I'm there. You can see it as a Black hire. I can see it as a hire for my skill. And I think that's one of the things that Black people, in general, kind of face. Like they have to get over the fact that maybe that they have been hired as a Black person because that's what's brought to them, but that you actually do have the skill and knowledge to do the job. And that can be another thing that weighs on us a little bit. Did I just get this job because I'm Black, or did I get this job because I'm Black and can do the job? If that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Do you think that because you kind of talk about, right, the ability to move through creative spaces without consideration of, being a Black woman, and then in professional spaces, do you think it's because creative community has a more accepting energy than professional spaces?
I do. And you do get, yes. I'll just say that. I think artists tend to be a lot more open in general. Artists like to be around different people. I personally, as an artist, love the camaraderie of different types of people. And Black people are not monolithic either. So I like to be in spaces that even Black people contribute different ideas or different feelings or different experiences in a space. And so being a jazz singer, which is what I mainly am known for in town, being a vocalist, being a theater person that came much later to me, I was doing Black shows, but all of those shows tended to be very multicultural. And that's in every sense of the term multicultural that you can be in. That is why I love that space. I love that space. And I can be used as a Black woman, bringing whatever I'm bringing to the table, but it's this acceptance of making a show whole because of the interactions that I would have with different types of people as, you know, as an actor. So yes.
I love that, because you know, as you were speaking on it, it really did dawn on me in this. I'm not an artist. I say that.
You're in an art space though.
Everybody, you know, uses that term differently. But
yep.
For me, I am very much rooted in creative space though. And that, but coming from a very long corporate background. And there's something different about the acceptance that comes in creative spaces. And just like you said, the differences that come to the table when you bring creatives together, you'll find, even if you handpick creatives that you think are the same, you will absolutely find that, you know, there's no such thing. Everybody brings something different to the table. And sometimes I wish that corporate and professional spaces had a better understanding of the real benefit that is. You know, having all of these different voices, it might be a little harder to manage, but the end result is going to be so much more robust because we have so many different voices represented in you know, whatever decisions are being made.
Yeah, and it can be hard to manage, but that's where the creatives really come in and figuring that out. And I think that the country in general is so used to, this is the way it is, this is the outcome, this is where it's going, that you're right, more businesses, I think, need to have more creatives on their team. In fact, I think a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed someone, and that was a quote that I had about how creatives usually are at the bottom scale. And if you push those creatives up to management, that the companies actually would flourish because they would have to be forced to look at things in a different light. That was something I read to someone the other day, and that's exactly that's exactly the situation, is that the creatives tend to be in just this little box to figure out how the higher ups want to work on things. But in essence, I think they all have the abilities as creatives to manage and to be creative at the same time.
Because I think at the base of it, we're creative thinkers.
Right.
And, you know, that brings about creative problem solving, that brings about creative, you know, product development, all types of things.
Yes.
You know, when you put creatives in leadership positions, you're going to get something different.
Yes.
And, you know, I wonder if some spaces don't want the difference, right? Because I think just as in human nature, businesses like to stay in their comfort zone too, right? So it is really interesting, and how that, the feeling of it too, because even if it's not spoken about, you can always feel the difference between a creative space and a non-creative space.
Right.
And I think that leads us really nicely into the creative space that you are at the helm of right now. And Ebony Road Players being everything that it is, right? And I think it has developed so much over time and adjusted and grown as, as businesses do. But I wonder what brought about the values of Ebony Road Players, because I don't know if everyone is familiar with the story of how you came to found Ebony Road Players, and we can talk about that if you'd like. But I also would like to dig a little bit into, where did the values come from?
Well, I think the initial value for me, because basically it all started in my head, which a lot of things do creatively, and not really having a lot of experience in starting a business like this. It was more of a, hey, look at all these things that I've done, and I don't see anyone else doing it. And I want to share that love and that experience of being a performer, theater, expressing yourselves. And the whole story is pretty long, and I won't get into it, at how I decided to start it, because it was kind of in a sad space that I was in at the time. But I think the values for me was sharing what I had experienced for a very long time. And what I did was, I'm going to say accidental, but I was seeing other people doing it. And I'm like, oh, my friend, and I talk about him all the time, Cedric Ward, was doing this stuff that I didn't even understand. And one day he just put me in a show, and I was like, oh, what is this that I'm enjoying? What is this space that I never thought I could be in? And then it just went from there. But I think along the way, the values became apparent through what was going on in the country, what was going on in our communities at the time. And I think being able to have these stories told of Black people and our relationships to other people in our community and in the world became of value. The education aspect became a value, and what you have behind you on the screen also became this social justice. It kind of just moved into these spaces on its own. But originally, the value is for me to share what I've been doing with other people, in hopes that we can keep that kind of love for Black art, especially, growing in West Michigan. I hope that makes sense, but it was very personal at first, and now it's kind of grown into something else. And I think we've had a lot of people really appreciate the type of work that we're doing. And sometimes those people can really tell you what your value is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And this, like, if we have art as the base, and because we're creative business, art is at the foundation of what it is that we do, you can't have a full experience of art without the education behind it, to understand where it came from and how it came about, and how to develop it. And then you can't have a full appreciation for art that is maybe separate from your own experience without that social justice component.
Mm-hmm.
It is an unfortunate reality that kind of turns fortunate, that a lot of times Black experience cannot exist without some form of social justice, because that's what we experience on a regular basis. And fighting for the right to exist becomes part of our story. So if we're telling our stories, social justice and the fight is so ingrained in our stories that, it makes sense that these values kind of developed on their own. I really appreciate how you've been able to hone in on them, though, and continuously go back to them, because when you have those three components, you have a full picture of this Black storytelling ability. And I absolutely love that.
Yeah, and can I add to that a little bit? Not only is this, the Black story, because we are definitely a large part of that, but the awesome art, the education of social justice, it really encompasses, like we said earlier, almost every aspect of this country. And it can be, the aspect of, okay, I'm going to use the term, not everybody likes it, the intersectionality of all of our experiences, I think, is another thing that Ebony Road Players really does. And if you look at movies, you and I talked about looking at certain movies, and even in commercials right now, people are taking the intersectionality of people's relationships and really pulling them together to tell a similar story, but a story that may have some components in it that might be a little different. And right now, people are pushing back from all of those stories being told. Some people are pushing back because they only want their story to be told. And the way I work is I want to feel everyone's story so I can figure out how I fit into that. And where we can find like stories, we become closer together and not in our silos.
Absolutely.
And that's just me personally, but I think that's part of Ebony Road Players too.
Absolutely. I think, it really speaks to building community.
Yes.
And being representative of one segment of the community does not eliminate the necessity of other segments being represented also. And I think that is really important when you speak about, we are a Black theater, and you have Jewish theater, and you have Actors Theater that does a lot with LGBTQ. Like, yes, they are smaller segments, but it's how do we fit into the whole story of the community as a whole?
Yes.
And that is, it's like you said, it's multicultural in the thought of our experiences are not soul experiences. They may be different, but when you look at my experiences and your experiences, we are at least a generation apart, and I still see similarities. I can see myself in other people's story, and we hope that everyone can see a bit of themselves in the stories that we tell too. Because I agree 100% that without all of us represented, in my opinion, none of us are really represented.
Right.
So looking at the community as a whole, West Michigan, Grand Rapids, what do you see for the future of the arts and the creative community where we are?
I see a lot of positive. I see amazing, wonderful things going on, because I think where I may not have had as much opportunity as some people have now, there's a growth. And I look at where I was when I was 20 and what was available to me, and when I look at now, even at my age, I can still be a part of the arts community in some form or fashion. And young people right now are just bursting out. They're being artists. They are making statements in social justice. They're making statements in education, and they're being creative. And as much as I would like to see more in the theater world, especially with, Ebony Road Players, because we're small and we're trying to grow, I see things around me that are amazingly positive. And as much as I said, again, there is pushback on some of the things that are going on, it's we are evolving as a creative body, as Black people, as like you said, the LGBTQ people. We are evolving to work together to make this community more vibrant, better, and understanding each other. And I really love that. It scares me a little bit because I am older and I'm like, oh, where are we going? What's going on? But young Black people especially do not have that fear that my parents had of me, singing in a bar, being on stage. My mother was afraid of me playing basketball because I went to a mostly white middle school. And I shouldn't say that because busing was going on at that time. So it was a multiracial school, but I played basketball, and she never came to not one show because she was a play, because she thought that I was going to get hurt. And so she was always, being born in the 30s and going through 50s and 60s was very protective. Where now I think young people are like, hey, this is who we are, and we are not going to have that fear. That's even my kids, they don't have fear of living in New York or LA or wherever, and being who they are. And I'm just excited about that. I'm excited to see that. Sometimes I, like, okay, what are you 30-year-olds doing? How are you making it work? I don't understand. But on the other hand, it's like, oh my gosh, you're doing it, and you're learning how to navigate through these waters. So I would say, as long as we don't have people pushing back too hard, and you learn from your ancestors of what they had to go through, but don't let that hold you back. I think it's wonderful.
I agree. I feel very similarly about my son's generation, the generation behind me. And I'm like, oh, it's really scary because you think we don't have fear. We have some. They have none. No fear whatsoever. And I see them burning it down to the ground, but to rebuild something beautiful. And I think that something's going to happen. Something big is going to happen in the world one way or another. And I feel like they're going to take us kicking and screaming, but we'll get there.
Yeah. And I think, and what you're saying, burning it down, I think there is still, when we do plays or whatever, there's still a little bit of things you can learn so that you don't burn it down, but maybe build upon it. But it's both ways, building upon something that your ancestors, created for you, but doing a twist, doing something new. Like I said, I would have never thought, and my parents would have never thought, that I'd be on stage. They would have never thought that I would have traveled where I had. I wished my dad had seen it, because he was the one that was, being a Black man from Tennessee in the 1930s, would have just, he was already, before he died, he was already concerned about who I was hanging with. And there was no way I could tell him that this was cool. This was going to be okay. Because it ended up being cool and being okay. And, every generation has something to offer. So there we go.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I think getting to a point, and creativity allows us to do that, to work cross-generational as well. That is really exciting.
Yes.
I think bringing in different cultures is one thing, but bringing in different generations and being able to create something together is really, really powerful. And I'm excited for any opportunity for us to do that in the community. So I just had one last question, or idea or thoughts from you. How do you think, or what would you what are your hopes for Ebony Road Players and how we fit into the future of our community here?
Well, that's a good question. I think about it daily, every morning, every night. Ebony Road Players, like I said, was something that I thought was needed at the time. There was not, to be a city this big, and there was not a dedicated Black theater in this community since the 1990s, late 1990s. I thought it needed to happen. The future for Ebony Road Players, for me, is very much, I think, in the hands of the community. I think it's very much in the hands of people who think that it is still relevant, which means we grow it. Younger people are in it, and really take it to a space that I, at this point, think that maybe I can't. I can still do things that the same way we've been doing it, but I think the future really lies in how people think it's very important in the community. And, I'm even to the point where if it's done what it's supposed to do, and that basically was to get Black theater artists in every segment of this city doing things with all the other all the other theater companies. And if it did that, I think we were successful. But if it goes on and we become more innovative with younger people, that would be what I would want to see. Because it's too, and Quianna, you and I have talked about this before, it is not about me. It is not about Edye Evans Hyde. It is about Ebony Road Players and how do we sustain? Are we sustainable in this community? And are we important in this community? And if the community thinks it is, then they will take it forward. Robeson Players was, I always say, man, that theater should not have stopped. But because it was so Cedric that it did stop. But then someone told me one day, and it was during our performance of Detroit 67, that it didn't stop, that Edye took it and made it Ebony Road Players. And I almost cried because I was like, even though it took some years, I guess that's right. So even if Ebony Road Players became something else, it's that movement to keep the Black art theater, some form, some fashion, in this community. And that's where I think it should be.
I love that. And I think, that really speaks to this idea that space exists, in so many forms, right? It is not ours. It belongs to the community. And everything that we do is for the community as a whole,
Yes.
Being rooted in Black storytelling and in Black theater, that is still a gift to the community as a whole. So it's very profound to hear an executive director saying, this is yours, right? This belongs to everyone. Because that is what I think, that's what nonprofit work is all about. But I think that is what art is.
Mm-hmm.
Art does not belong to a single person.
Nope.
Art is meant to be shared and enjoyed by everyone. So I really, really appreciate you saying that, because we're here for the community. We are community, and we are building community, and we want to be a part of the community. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I am glad that you agreed to do it. I know it was kind of a just a hatched idea on my end, like, hey, can I interview you? But I think even for me, learning, little bits about you and your journey that I haven't heard before. We've worked together for 4.5 years, and
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and I'm still learning new things. And I think I do hope that our listeners get something really good out of it, whether it be about your journey and inspiration there, or about Ebony Road Players and how we fit into the fabric of the community, or about what it's like to navigate this world as a Black woman. I do hope that our listeners can really get as much out of it as I did this morning. And I appreciate you having the courage to be on the other side of that.
The only reason I hesitated is like, okay, again, we don't want it to be about Edye. We don't want it to be about Edye. But, if I can share whatever I can share from, my experiences, what's really hard for me is that my experiences were not something planned. They were just something that happened, and I had the opportunity to take advantage of something. And I don't like to put myself on a shelf like, oh, Edye did this, Edye did that. But the beauty around what my life has been about living a life that I had an opportunity to live and enjoy and meet the most awesome people in all over the world. And I want other people to have that kind of experience. You only live once. You only have one opportunity. So that's what I want. Quianna, before we leave, I'm taking over just for a moment.
Oh, okay.
We would like for everyone to go on our YouTube page, right? And subscribe to the other people that you and I guess, will be speaking to in the future. So tell our listeners a little bit about that.
So you can find this podcast on as many different channels as possible. So we do run an audio podcast that you can find on all of your favorite podcast networks. We also, all of the videos are available on our YouTube channel. It's Ebony Road Players. So follow us there, subscribe to our channel, because these conversations are happening. We are once a week for as long as, we have the momentum to keep doing that. But it's these conversations about every segment. We've talked to people in healthcare, people in education. We've talked to other people at the helms of other creative spaces. We've talked to just people from the theater community. Every conversation is something different. And, we are focused on awesome art, education, and social justice. And those conversations are powerful. So, subscribe to them. I believe we have several on our YouTube channel right now, and they will be coming out weekly. So stick with us. It's good stuff coming out of the Ebony Road Players podcast, which was another one of Edye's ideas. She's like, we should do a podcast. And I said, all right, let's figure out how to get you a podcast. And it really has been, it's been wonderful for me to watch and to see it develop. And it'll keep growing and changing. And we are open to hearing from the community, having guests from all over, because that's the benefit of, this virtual world that we live in. We're not stuck in these confines of our own community. So,
and I have to tell you, it is the most fun thing for me. I love talking to people on the podcast. Love it. Yeah. So I might be doing this long after anything. So
Ebony Road Players turned into something else, but the Ebony Road Players podcast, listen, she's been going year after year. So it's been an honor today to step into your shoes. Just for a minute, I still prefer my own shoes because
you did a wonderful job.
I think there's a flair that you bring to to this world that is different than anybody else. And I appreciate you so much. And
I appreciate you too.
For sharing that with us and allowing us to be on the journey with you.
Thank you, Quianna.
Absolutely.
So much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. We will see you soon.
Okay. Have a good day. Thank you for listening to the Ebony Road Players podcast. Creating theater with a purpose is our mission, and that is not possible without people like you. We appreciate you joining us for this podcast and for being a part of our diverse community. To view the video version of this episode and gain access to exclusive Ebony Road Players content and perks, join our community on Patreon at patreon.com/Ebony Road Players. In the words of Zora Neale Hurston, quote, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you," unquote. If you have a story to share, we'd love to hear from you. Contact us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website, ebonyroad.org. And we look forward to continuing the conversation next time on the Ebony Road Players podcast.